This is Pumbaa, my 2007 Toyota FJ Cruiser. It's got 175,000 miles on it. In today's video, we're gonna do some work to make sure it can do at least another 175,000. Let's get to it. Pumbaa is, without a doubt, one of the best vehicles I've ever owned. We've been on so many cool adventures together, been so many cool places, hung out with some furry friends, and even towed my Triumph Tier 6 across the country. So let's make sure we can keep doing that for many years to come. Now everybody knows that Toyotas, and especially the 4.0 V6 that's in Pumbaa, will run for hundreds of thousands of miles. But that's only if you take care of them. So that's exactly what we're gonna do today. We're gonna run through a whole list of maintenance items, not all of which are due right this moment, but they're all due within the next few thousand miles. So we're gonna knock them all out at once so that the service intervals line up moving forward. We're gonna start off with an oil change, then we're gonna do the oil in the diff and the transfer cases, we're gonna flush the power steering fluid, we're gonna flush the coolant, then we're gonna replace the spark plugs. I'll also throw in some footage from when I did the engine and cabin air filters not too long ago, and when I rotated the tires while I was visiting my buddy in Colorado. And I know what you're about to type in the comments, wait, if you're doing all that, shouldn't you also be flushing the brake fluid and servicing your transmission? Yes, you should. But I did the brake fluid not too long ago when I replaced all my calipers. I unfortunately don't have footage of that. And I serviced the transmission this spring. I also unfortunately don't have footage of that. But they have been done, rest assured. We're also going to be fixing a couple very minor issues that it's got, but in the meantime, let's start with the easy thing, the oil change. It's worth mentioning that for the purposes of this video, we're focusing primarily on fluids and engine health. There are some other things that I need to get done in the near future. I need to replace the CV axles, I need to replace some suspension bushings, and I want to take a look at my ball joints and wheel hubs to make sure that those are also in good health. But for now, I just want to make sure that this engine and my drivetrain are going to be running real well for a real long time. Luckily, oil changes on this thing are pretty easy. There's a cutout in the skid plate that allows you to access the drain plug, and as a result, it's not too messy unless you do that. But at any rate, I went up top, battled the oil filter for a while, questioning some of my past life choices.
Oh, dang. Whoever put this on last must have really hated me.
I genuinely don't know how I got it that tight because I definitely did it by hand last time, but at any rate, I got the engine cover off, got a filter wrench out, and took this off. This is probably the messiest part of the job because of the way that the weep holes on the filter housing work there. They drain down onto your frame, but it's not the end of the world. I got the filter replaced with some oil on the gasket to make sure that it seals well, and then I went down underneath and got the drain plug put back on.
The torque spec on this is anywhere from 27 to 30 foot-pounds. So we're gonna do just about 28. I use Valvoline High Mileage Max Life. I'm not sponsored, obviously. I just like it. Let's see how on my game I am here.
This is not smart, by the way. You should just use a funnel. It's a very high risk, low reward game considering that my alternator is directly underneath the fill port, but we got out of it without much trouble.
All right, so engine oil's done. Next, we're gonna jump down the list a little bit and do the diff and the transfer case. I say diff singular because I actually got a brand new rear diff about 2,000 miles ago. So that was installed, I did a 500-mile break-in period, and then I drained and refilled the oil in that. So that's taken care of. All we gotta do today is the transfer case and the front diff. So let's do that.
All right, I don't think y'all can see me, but we're back at the transfer case here. Anytime that you're working on a transfer case, a transmission, differentials, anything like that, that has a fill plug and a drain plug, it's very important that you remove the fill plug first. That way you don't accidentally drain everything out without knowing that you could fill it back up. If this is seized or anything like that, that's bad news bears. So we're gonna start here. I do have a catch canister right underneath this. A little bit. All right, and now that we know that we can refill it, we're gonna go ahead and pop off the drain plug. Nice. That's actually not too dark either, so that's a good sign. No flakes coming out of it, looking good. So that is done draining. Clean that up. Got a brand new crush washer on here. Get the drain plug put back in. For now, I'm just gonna get this snug. That's good. And then I will torque it to spec once we're all done. For the transfer case, I'm using Lucas Oil 7590. I should be able to just squeeze this straight into the fill plug. Sorry. We're just gonna go until this starts trickling back out of the fill plug. And there we go. Get our fill plug back on. 27 foot-pounds. Good. Transfer case, done. Let's move on to the front diff. Alright, I had to remove the skid plate, but same story here. You're going to want to remove the fill plug before you touch the drain plug. Yep. And then we'll get the drain plug. Well, this is very odd. My 10 mil socket will not go into this drain plug, even though it is a 10 mil. I know this is a 10 mil. This 10 mil Allen wrench will, but then when I spin it, it's not actually getting any purchase. It's just rounding it. So clearly this is damaged, and I'm gonna need to extract it. However, I'm not gonna do that until I have a replacement on hand. So I'm gonna put the fill plug back in, and then I'm gonna save this job for later. All right, I'm gonna call the dealership when they open to see if they can get me that drain plug, and then I can finish that front diff. But in the meantime, I'm gonna flush the power steering fluid. I highly recommend putting some paper towels or shop rags down so you don't make too big of a mess here, because no matter how careful you are gonna spill some fluid. But you'll start off by opening up the reservoir and draining the fluid that's currently in it into some other sort of vessel. I just chose this plant pot because it's what I had laying around. We'll dispose of that, and then we'll take off the return line, which will be the higher line on your reservoir. You get that off, and then you cap it because you're gonna refill your reservoir with new fluid, and you don't want that draining out. So I've got this topped up with the new fluid. I've got the return line off, my jar here. So now we're gonna go switch the key to the accessory position, cycle the wheels back and forth, checking this periodically to make sure I'm not running the reservoir dry. And then we'll check this fluid, and once that fluid becomes the new red of the fresh fluid, then we'll know that we're pretty much fully flushed, and we can go ahead and fill this to the proper level. Hopefully my very rudimentary animation there helped you understand it, but this really is a pretty standard bleeding process. We're just running it through the steering cycle to push the fluid through the system, and then that's gonna empty into this jar we've got here, and then we'll keep refilling the reservoir, emptying it into the jar until it's done. All in all, I think I did this about 4 times. And that fluid is looking pretty fresh. Now that you've got fresh fluid in the system, you're gonna go ahead and take that cap off and put your return line back on and get that clamped down for the next step. Now we're gonna get this filled up to the cold max. There's a difference between hot and cold max. Because the car hasn't run yet this morning, we're gonna go ahead and take it to the cold max. Now we're gonna do what we did before. We're going to go put the car into accessory mode, and then we're gonna cycle the steering back and forth, and essentially that's just bleeding the system. All right, so you can see that we did actually lose a little bit of our fluid level there, and that's because, you know, there was presumably air in the system, and now that that's out, our fluid has dropped down a little bit. So we're gonna fill it back up to that cold max, and then we're gonna go start up the car and let it continue to bleed. Safety PSA. Definitely don't do what I did here and leave your shop rags right next to your cooling fan when you start the car, and definitely don't reach into the engine bay right next to that cooling fan while it's running to retrieve them. All right, power steering flush, done. Unfortunately, that brings us to the coolant flush, which isn't a big deal, but the bleed ports are really annoying to access on the FJ, and I've been putting it off, but it's time to get it done. Let's get through it together, shall we? All right, Mr. Drama, calm down, it's not that big of a deal. I took off the wheels so that I could access the engine block bleed ports more easily, but I started off with the radiator. All right, so right here, through your skid plate, there is a bleed port. You're gonna get a piece of tubing, attach your tubing onto that port, like so. And then I'm going to put a gallon jug underneath this, and then you just loosen this with your hand, and that's how you bleed the radiator coolant. Fortunately, my little knob on this bleeder is broken, so it's not the easiest to twist. There we go. We're gonna let the radiator drain for a little bit, and then we'll move on to the block. While that was going, I also took off the coolant reservoir while I was on FaceTime with my girlfriend, Rachel. Everybody say, "Hi, Rachel!" And by the time I got the reservoir drained and reinstalled, the radiator was all done. I then moved on to the engine block. On the passenger side, this is not that difficult. You got your bleed port and your bleed screw right there. You're just gonna attach that same, I think it's 5/16 hose onto that bleed port, and then you're gonna crack open the bleed screw.
Oh, there we go.
I later found out that those are prone to breaking, so I'm glad I didn't do that, but at any rate, I got the passenger side done and moved on to the driver's side, which is, as you can see, quite a bit more convoluted. That's the bleed port and screw that I need to get to, and this is all the stuff I gotta go through to get to it. Of course, I'm aided by the fact that those side covers in my wheel well are destroyed, but it still wasn't the easiest thing to get this hose and then with all these extensions get onto the bleed screw, but I got there in the end.
Oh, there we go.
Turns out though, maybe I didn't need to.
No, we're not getting a lot out of this side. So I have read online that in like 2010 or 11, with no other design changes, they actually got rid of the driver's side bleed port. So theoretically, you can do all of this from the passenger side, but I wanted to confirm, and it does seem that that's true because I did the passenger side first, and now I'm doing the driver's side, and I got like, I mean, I'd be shocked if it was a quarter of a cup out of there. So for anybody curious, it does seem like you can do this all from the passenger side. So this was all for naught, but it was a good experiment. So I'm gonna close this one back up, and then we'll close up the passenger side, and then we'll refill it. All right, all of our bleed ports are closed up, so we're gonna go ahead and fill the system with the Toyota OEM coolant, the pink stuff. And we're gonna be using this no-spill funnel just to make our lives a little bit easier as we burp the system. And you can see that old coolant, it wasn't bad, but it's pink. The vehicle will self-bleed while running to a certain extent, but there are things that we can do to help it along, such as turn the heat on full blast because airlocks are common in the heater core, run it up through a bunch of different RPMs and different rev cycles. I was checking for leaks throughout the whole process, and then I was also burping the radiator hoses with the engine off just to make sure that those were clear. Throughout this whole process, it maintained a really healthy, consistent temperature, and we stopped getting air bubbles. All right, plug this up, being careful because now the coolant is at temp. Open up my reservoir here. Gonna empty this coolant into my reservoir since that's empty. And that got me most of the way there, but I'm gonna go ahead and just take the coolant right up to the fill line. And there we are. Put the radiator cap back on. And we are golden, pony boy. Now right after I finished the coolant yesterday, I had to jet and run some errands, but we're back at it today. We're gonna do the spark plugs. Replacing spark plugs on most vehicles is a pretty easy job. Not all, of course, Subaru, but here I just had to remove my filter and my coils. And all you need to remove these is a 10 mil, so hopefully you haven't lost yours. As with anything, but especially anytime that you're working with something regarding your cylinders, it's important to keep these organized. So I'm laying them out in the exact order that they are viewed from the passenger side of the engine. And then to get our spark plugs, it's just a 5/8 socket with an extension. And the torque spec on these is pretty low, so they should not be difficult to get out. Now, unfortunately, I can't find my magnetic 5/8, so literally all I'm doing here is rubbing a magnet on the end of my regular socket to magnetize this temporarily. Et voila.
Whoa, was that French? Did he study abroad? I think he did. He sounds fluent.
You can see just what a contrast that is between the old and the new. I should have done this a little while ago probably, but we're getting to it now. We're switching out these Denzos for the NGKs, and we need to get these gapped to 40 to 43 thousandths. So let's do that and get them installed.
I ordered those spark plugs directly from Toyota, and they were actually all gapped properly right out of the box, which is really helpful. So I got all the spark plugs torqued down to 14 foot-pounds, got the coils back on and reconnected, being sure to inspect the connectors just for corrosion, and they all looked great. So I got that all done, and I moved on to the driver's side. As with the coolant and many other things, the driver's side is a little more difficult. There's just more stuff in the way, but still not a horrible process. You just gotta pull some brackets and hoses out of the way, get to those coils, disconnect them, pull out the old spark plugs, put in the new, and then get those torqued down as well.
All right, one final double check that I got everything reconnected. And I did. So let's fire it up, see how we did. Don't worry, Goose, I'm not leaving without you. Okay, I'm actually really embarrassed to admit this, but I don't know if you could tell from the audio in that. It was running rough, there were lights on the dash, obviously, and I came out here, I looked, and I realized that I had not in fact connected everything. I had neglected to reconnect my injectors on this side, which is really stupid, but luckily it was only for a few seconds. I got it turned off, I'm gonna plug those in, I'm gonna go redo it. Again, kind of embarrassed to admit that, but I don't want this to be a channel where I pretend I do everything perfectly. I messed up. I won't do it again in the future, that's for sure. I'm gonna get them plugged in, and then I'm gonna go fire it back up. We're definitely all good. It's running really smooth. Everything's great. Unfortunately, because I did start it up with those disconnected before, the codes are still on the dash. So, I'm gonna go borrow a scanner, I'm gonna clear those, and then we should be golden. All right, before I put the engine cover back on, there's one other thing under here that I need to address. I've noticed a slight tick coming from this engine as of late, which has literally kept me up at night, a feeling that I'm sure many of you can relate to. Some of you may have even noticed it earlier in the video when I was getting the coolant up to temp, but if not, here's another clip of what that sounds like. Now, of course, I had myself convinced that this was worst case scenario, that it was like a lifter tick, something like that. So one of those nights when I was being kept up thinking about it, I was scrolling FJ Cruiser forums and I found a 20-year-old post from when these cars were brand new, talking about this PWM vacuum switching valve, I think it's called, right here. Apparently, it's a very rattly piece and it rattles against your manifold and that magnifies the sound. And that only happens when it's at idle and up to temp, which is when I've noticed it. So the fix for that is to just pull it off the bracket and then put an O-ring underneath the head of the bolt and then on the other side of the bracket that it attaches to. And it doesn't completely eliminate it, they say, but it makes it much easier to stomach.
So with that done, I went for a drive, both to clear that code off my dash and to see if that fix worked. Here's a video of what it sounds like now. I can't hear it in the cab, which is great, but under the hood, it's definitely still there. I'm not horribly worried because based on all my research, it is just that vacuum switching valve and these engines are just kind of noisy in general. If anybody has evidence that would suggest I should be worried, please feel free to let me know in the comments, but for now, I'm calling it good. As I'm editing this, I'm still waiting on that front diff drain plug to come in, so let's recap a few other easy things. Obviously, the cabin air filter is really easy. I should have done it a while ago, as you can see. The engine air filter is even easier. It's just these two clips. You take that off, you take the old air filter out, you shake it all about, you do the hokey pokey, and you put the new one in. And just like that, this baby can breathe. I also rotated the tires about a month ago, and my buddy Ian helped me out with that, and we had some great chats along the way.
Listen, I may be stupid.
Wait, is there nothing else after that?
Nope.
But you all know the drill with tire rotations. Fronts go to the back, backs go to the front, you swap the sides, easy peasy.
Yeah.
You're joined now by Nate a few days after that last voiceover, who has received a new drain plug and is trying to get the old one out. I didn't have the right size bolt extractor, so I started by hammering in an oversized socket, trying to hit that with the impact, and that wasn't working, so I moved on to my breaker bar, but that was unfortunately just rounding out the plug worse.
If at first you don't succeed, make it worse trying harder.
After trying to hammer in a T60 torque spit unsuccessfully, I was starting to accept that I would probably need to go buy the right tool.
Now, I love working on cars. It's fun and good and cool. It never upsets me, especially not when it's my daily.
We hope you enjoyed the musical stylings of Nate B. Building, who has now gone and purchased the proper bolt extractor. So I got this drilled out using a 3/8 bit with that tape to mark where I needed to stop so that I wouldn't drill through the plug all the way and get metal shavings inside the diff. I then hammered in the extractor, and wouldn't you know it, when you just go buy the right tool, things work.
Oh, thank goodness.
From here, it was a pretty straightforward job. Just remove the old drain plug, get that cleaned up, install the new one with a new crush washer, I got that snugged up, and then I removed the old fill plug. Astute viewers may notice that I'm using a different oil here than I was on the transfer case, and that's because after this production year, Toyota updated their specs for the differentials to 7585 instead of 7590, so that's what I'm using. These get torqued to 29 foot-pounds for the fill and 48 for the drain, and we were good. Finally, this wasn't on the list, but I had noticed my windshield wipers were getting pretty streaky, so I replaced all 3 of them, yes 3, with some new Bosch Icons, and then I got the fluid reservoir filled back up and finished everything off by giving the engine bay a nice cleaning. And just like that, we've got a mechanically sound FJ Cruiser with a real pretty engine bay. Which is actually a great segue into the topic of the next video, where we're going to be giving Pumbaa a bit of a makeover and make sure the exterior looks real pretty as well. Because the only thing better than having a vehicle that'll run for hundreds of thousands of miles is having a vehicle that'll look real good doing it. So keep an eye out for that one in the next week or two, and if you enjoyed this one, please consider liking and subscribing. It would mean the world to me. But at any rate, thanks for being here, and go build something today.